This is the Thriving Dentist Show with Gary Takis, where we help you develop your ideal dental practice, one that provides personal, professional, and financial satisfaction.
Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Dentist Show. I'm Gary Takis, your podcast co-host. If you're a regular listener, you know that we mix up formats now and again. And this format that we're going to experience in this podcast episode is a pure interview format. And today, I am with my good friend, Dr. Paul Etchison, joining us on the podcast. If you're a regular listener to the Thriving Dentist Show, you're going to recognize his name. Because he's been on the podcast as a guest in the past. But we're going to have a fun conversation that I know you guys are going to love. So first of all, welcome, Paul. Glad you had a chance to join us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Gary. Always good to come on this show, man. I tell you, every time I've been on here, I always tell you, like, I started listening to you. So it's like, it's so cool for me to get interviewed by you. But yeah, happy to be here. Always good catching up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your kind words. We have a lot of mutual friends, you know, in dentistry, and Alan Mead, one of our mutual friends, put a label on me that makes me smile. He called me the Podfather.
Yeah.
Now that was
I remember that at the Voices of Dentistry.
Yeah, at the Voice of Dentistry, and then that was either because I was the first podcaster or that I'm old. And I'm going with the former. That it was because it was the first.
I think so too. I think he was intimidated by you. It was strong. It was a compliment. It was good.
I think it was meant as a compliment.
Yeah.
Alan's a great guy. But,
yeah.
Well, most of you know Paul, but Paul is a dentist. He's an author. He's a podcaster. He's got a lot of cool things going on. He's a coach. A lot of cool things going on. But Paul, in case some of our listeners don't know your background, would you be kind enough to start and share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do a quick brief intro. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I graduated in 2009, opened up a startup practice in 2012. Grew that, expanded our office from 5 to 11 ops, grew it to about $6 million in collections. And then I partnered up with the DSO about 3 years ago. And that's been a really good experience. I'm out of contract with them, so I could essentially leave if I wanted to. I don't plan on doing it because I still like it. And I have my podcast, and I've written two books, Dental Practice Hero 1 and Dental Practice Hero 2. And I think that's about it. And I like doing the coaching, and I just love everything dental business and dentistry, and this whole experience with me selling my practice and really cutting my clinical days has made me realize how much I really enjoy being part of a dental team and just still being with my team. Cause I got a chance to get like 4 or 5 weeks off at one point, and I missed it. And yeah, I like being part of it. So yeah, that's my brief intro.
Great intro. I appreciate you did the nice Reader's Digest condensed version. But
I also have a podcast, and sometimes it's like, okay, let's get to the meat here.
Let's get to it. Tell our listeners a little bit about your schedule these days. How often are you working clinically?
So I do 6 days each month. So it's a Tuesday and a Wednesday, 2 or 3 weeks each month. And I'm just doing 5-hour days where I do ortho, band and bracket on kids one day. And the other day it's like maybe some implants and veneers. And usually it's just some family. It's very relaxed. And I love the ortho. I actually think I'm going to get rid of the general dentistry that I still do a little bit. I just like the ortho. It's so delegatable, and I got a good team.
I'm pretty sure that thousands or tens of thousands of our listeners just leaned in to listen more carefully when they heard 6 days a month. And that was before you even got to the 5 hours a day thing.
Yeah.
I think we've got a lot of our listeners.
I pulled myself out. Yeah.
I want that gig.
It's fun. It's a good gig. But I do spend time managing the practice and working with my team. It's not like all my friends think I just work, 10 hours a week and I just sit at home and do whatever. No, I'm busy. I have other stuff.
Well, in all seriousness, dentists that own their practice, have to put in a lot more time than just the clinical time, for sure. And it's not, your schedule is not defined by just the clinical hours. It's like clinical hours plus, to really keep everything
We've
going.
got 40 plus team members, so it's a big team. And that's been a learning experience through my whole career that I've learned a whole lot from.
What an exciting trajectory, though, from 2009 startup, right?
2012 startup, 2009 graduation. Yeah.
2009 graduate, 2012 startup, right? And then growing and developing that practice. And I imagine how big was the facility when you started?
We started at 5 operatories, and then in 2018 we expanded into 11.
Okay. Was 11 enough?
I don't think it's ever enough. I really don't. I mean, it seemed like a lot when we had it. We're at a point right now where we're at capacity with 11, and we're open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. 4 days a week. We're open on Saturdays. We're open for long year. Yeah. We're not open on Friday nights, but we're open through Fridays. We have every chair is full, and I don't think we can squeeze anything more out of it. And I just don't own enough equity right now to take on an expansion and a larger team and more headaches. It just, the juice was not worth the squeeze of me. That's why we just dropped Delta back in August. So
we're gonna hold that thought. I'm going to come back. I'm going to circle back and talk about that. In my own practice, Paul Nielsen, my dentist business partner, when we built our first office of 6 ops, we thought, oh, this is going to be good. This will be perfect forever.
Felt big.
Yeah. And then we quickly outgrew it. And we were very fortunate last year to be able to double the size of our space. We were able to acquire the space immediately next to ours, sharing a common wall. We were able to acquire it, and we were able to go from 6 to 12. And now I'm saying more cautiously, because when I did 6, I thought, okay, this is good. This will be all you need, Paul. This is it. Not even close. And then when we got, now it's 12, I'm saying, I think maybe this, well, I don't want to paint myself into a corner, but I think this might be good, but we'll see. I mean, you guys are really intentional about like your patient experience. You're really intentional about how you run the office. And I have some team members that will say, because they've been with me since the beginning, they'll say, you know, I just miss when we were small. I really do. And I miss it too, but I have to remind people that, hey, we really provide a great service for our patients, and we are growing because we provide such a great experience. This would have never stayed small. It wasn't possible. And now we're doing 6 million. We did 1 million our first year. I said, we're doing 6 times as much as we did 10 years ago. Is everything ethical and to good quality? And they say, yeah. And I say, then we're just helping 6 times as many people. You know, I love that you said that, Paul, because I think when we think about growth, naturally, you and I can put a green visor on and we can do business. And our listeners can do that as well. But I find that if we start thinking about growth in a more noble way, about serving others, about changing more lives, about helping more people have great oral health, it becomes a wonderful rallying point for our team. Then the numbers follow. I'm a firm believer that we lead with our values, with our vision, with how we serve others. And then the numbers follow when you do that, as opposed to, setting out to build and plug in whatever number you want, practice. It really is much more, it's easier to get team member subscription and passion around values and serving others.
So true. Yeah. And I
think bigger is better.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that we set goals, or should we be setting production goals, or should we just be setting goals on how we want things to function and what we want the practice to do? Because I think if you focus on the practice and the operations and stuff, the numbers just work out. And it's about helping people. I think it's really hard for a team to get behind numbers, I guess. And whenever I look at like systems that don't implement, a lot of times it's like, I haven't defined that why. I haven't like said why this is important to the patients or the practice. Because one thing that I've always said to my team since we've opened is I got 2 primary goals. 1, this is going to be a great place for patients. I want this to be the best place for patients. But 2, which is more important than number 1, is I want to create a great place to work for our team. So that's everything, every system we have. It's like, how is it good for the patients? How is it good for the team? And I think if you just stick to that, everything else just falls into place. Like, that's the big goal.
Man, I couldn't say it any better than you just said it. And Paul, can we agree that as we're recording this in late 2023, we're kind of in uncharted territory in the hiring, and not just in dentistry, but businesses, across different,
a little scary,
different aspects. Very different. You and I remember a time when you could put an ad out and you could have 8 great resumes, within hours. And frankly, they were all qualified. And then it was a matter of picking the one that was the best fit for you. And today the landscape has really changed, except I think you just provided the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you provide the place that provides the best environment for our team. Then you're going to attract and keep the best team members.
We keep people.
And you're
we don't always attract as many as we want, but it's funny. I remember I recorded some videos about hiring maybe 5 years ago. And I was just watching these recently because I'm in a project where I'm recording new videos now. And I mentioned, if they don't send the cover letter, I just throw it away. If there's no cover letter, I throw it. And now, like you mentioned, it used to be we used to choose between people. Now we're just like, hey, I like you. And instead of me asking you questions, I'm going to sell you on me because please like me. I want them to like me now,
Now there are some of our listeners that will identify with what I'm about to say, and I'm going to try to not be judgmental. There are doctors making hiring decisions based on, well, she has a pulse.
Yeah.
So she's in.
I've done it. I've been there. I've done it. It didn't work out, but right. I learned something, I guess.
Yeah.
I think empty seats are sometimes better than the wrong people wrong people in the seats. I'd prefer.
I think it's more important than ever to be intentional about our hiring. And I think one of the things that means today, from my vantage point, is that we strongly consider hiring outside of dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, obviously certain positions have to be hired inside dentistry because of credentials, but let's look outside of dentistry, because there's a lot of really good. There's a lot of change happening in the workforce world. And there's a lot of, think about what's going on in retail space, brick and mortar retail businesses, banking, another example. Those jobs are going the way of the dodo bird. Everything's being done virtually. And yet there's some very good people in retail and banking that could make really good dental team members. There's a lot of teachers that are very, very frustrated with what's going on school district politics. And they're saying, I want to look for another career. There's a lot of nurses in healthcare wanting to pivot away from healthcare, where everything is about managed care, and they want to get back to taking care of people the way they're taken care of. And so I think there's places we can find people today. It's a bigger project, because then we have to train, and we have to, we have to bring them up to speed, and we have to train. It's not plug and play, but maybe it requires a little bit of creativity. I want to pivot this discussion though, Paul, and I want you and I to talk about something I think our listeners will be interested in. I believe there's some confusion in our profession about the size of a practice and the ability to provide a great patient experience and great clinical care. And I think there's a lot of people think, well, if you've got a quote high-end fee-for-service practice, it's going to be a small boutique practice. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to politely disagree with that, because in my own experience, we grew Life Smiles to be a very large practice. Yeah. And I don't believe that the size of the practice and the quality of the care and the patient experience are mutually exclusive. In other words, something has to go down for the other to happen. I believe that it can be done, in the same practice. You can grow that practice, you can grow it significantly, and you can still maintain a very high level of care, the kind of care that we're proud of, and a patient experience. But I will say it's harder. It's harder to do that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, when I graduated school, I had an associateship that was in a very large practice, and I opened up, like I said, 5 operatories. We had a small team, maybe 10, 12 people. And that was a fear of mine when we were going to 11, because I knew we were going to double the size of our team. And I didn't want to be like that associateship I had. And that was just the thing, is like, I want to keep this culture. I really want to keep this culture. And we were able to do it. It happened slowly. Like it wasn't like we went from like 10 to 40 employees overnight, but it was a lot of bumps and bruises on the way, things that we realized that we needed to do, things that we realized that were important that we didn't think were. I mean, for instance, in 2020, when we shut down for 11 weeks and then we came back and nobody could do anything or be together or go out and do anything. I mean, we realized our culture really suffered. And it was something that was really important for our team, was doing a lot of social events together. Maybe a year and a half later, when it started opening up and we started getting together, and we're like, oh my gosh, like we thought we we thought it was, wow, look at what happened to the practice culture now that we grew. And it was really just COVID kept us from being friends. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Once we started. So I think you can totally do a good culture. I think it requires layers of management to some extent. Like, I can't be buddy with 40 plus employees, but I can know what's really going on in 5 people's lives and be really close with them. And they can really know what's going on in their departments. There needs to be some layers there because it's just eventually gets too big, but you got to focus on it. I mean, we just had a quarterly meeting where we focused on the patient experience, and we had every single team member set up a room. And I went around and I told them what I didn't like about it, because this was stuff that we did when we were small. And it's going to make me sound anal, but I want that provider chair in that corner, and I want it on a 45-degree angle. I want the patient chair to be perpendicular to the wall, like this little ottoman in the back. What's wrong with that?
Well, I knew
it should be in the corner, It's like,
I knew from the first time we met, you and I were soulmates, and it's just been confirmed because it's not 46 degrees, it's 45, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the thing is like, a patient's not going to go through your office and say, wow, everything was really perpendicular and straight when I walked in the room. But they will go through the whole process, and all these little things will add up to a, wow, that was a really special experience. So we went through all that. We went through all of our verbiages. We sat patients we went and got them from the waiting room. And I always want people to meet in the middle, because I feel like if you're at a party, you see a friend and you like them, you meet in the middle. We don't just say, hey, get over here, come to the door, come sit down. So we went through that. We worked on our handoffs at the front desk. We worked on verbiages that we use to talk to patients. I mean, everything we have been so detailed, and I don't want to give the impression we're scripted, but we have a process that works. And I don't like when my team breaks that process, because it's what's worked for us. And like I said, people go through our office like, wow, you got such a great team, such a great office. They don't realize the training and all those little magical steps that we put together and that were intentional. And I think a lot of offices who are wanting more good referrals and like 5-star reviews, often they're not really they're just leaving it up to what their people do. They're not talking about it. And I think that's really important. And we miss that.
One of the ways I think about this, Paul, my wife happens to be a really, really, really good cook.
Mm-hmm.
Self-taught, nothing formal, but she is really good. And it's kind of like a recipe, Paul, where my wife will try something new, and I'm her taster, and
it's a good job.
she'll I mean, someone's got to do it, so I volunteer, and she asks for brutal honesty, and sometimes something doesn't come out quite right, and it's that she left out one ingredient, accidentally left out one ingredient. And it wasn't intentional, but that's what made the difference. And that's how kind of I would equate that new patient experience. It could be that there was a detail that just was left out that made the experience something less than. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the thing that we got to think about is when we're looking at brands and brand experience, is that a negative brand experience is going to carry so much more weight than all those positives. So you might need 6 positives to outweigh a really nasty negative one. And that's sometimes when we're looking at strong brands, we see consistency, and we see consistency in product brands where the only interaction is like you're making a product and you're buying the product and experiencing. Even if you go to you buy like a Coke from a gas station and the clerk is kind of not that nice, you don't really say like, I'm never buying a Coke again. The clerk that sold it to me wasn't good, because they're not represented by them. But it's very easy to control that. Now we're in a business where we've got, X amount of individuals with things going on at home from different values and different upbringings. And sometimes they're upset and sometimes having a bad day. And we're hoping that they can provide a consistently good patient experience. And I don't think people are capable of it unless you get intentional and say, this is what we do. Because otherwise, I mean, we're human. We make mistakes. And I'm not saying we don't make mistakes in my practice. We make a lot of mistakes. But anytime we make a mistake and we drop the ball on a patient, we always look at each other and we're very forgiving, and we always show grace, and we say, what can we come up with so this doesn't happen again? That's what's so important to me, is that coming. So sometimes I get dentists ask me, I need to systematize my practice. Where should I start? And I have places to start, like maintenance checklists and basic stuff. But I think your patients will let you know where to start, because when you screw it up, find out about it. That's where you start building there.
Well, you know that I'm a huge advocate of a relationship-driven practice. And what that means to me is that we know our patients' names, we know their spouse's name, we know their kids' names, we know their dog's name, we know their hobbies, we know their interests, we know what college they went to. We know the important dates in their life. Maybe we know that Linda, one of our patients, is taking care of an elderly mother right now. And the larger your practice gets, the harder that is. But I'll tell you that I think one of the best ways to help our team members really embrace the relationship-driven practice is to model it. It's just like our kids, Paul, that if we want our kids to pick up particular traits and qualities and virtues, the best way we as parents, and now for me, grandparents, can do is model it, right? You want to be consistent, you want to model it. So one of the things I want our listeners to think about is how well do you know your team members?
Yeah.
Do we know their spouse's name, their kid's name, their dog's name? Do we know their faith? Do we know their hobbies? Do we know their interests? Do we know, maybe it's a multi-generational family. Maybe they're taking care of elderly grandparents. Now, how much do we know about them? And I think that it starts there. It starts at home. It starts with our doctors really knowing our team members. True. Because if we show them that, I really think it's quality. If we show them that quality, they're likely to mirror and match that when it comes to interacting with our patients. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. And it's something that I learned, I would say the hard way, is as we've grown and gotten bigger, I was still practicing a lot of dentistry and trying to do the management. And I was very busy, and people would come in my office to ask me for something, but I was kind of short with them because I was just so busy. I was overwhelmed. And I noticed that when it came to time for me to maybe do some coaching or give performance reviews, it became a little more difficult to have those conversations because the relationship wasn't really there. And that's when I realized that, walking around my practice and just talking with my team, I'm so busy. It feels like such a waste of time. I mean, not that you should do it because it's something, not that it has like relationship capital. I'm not saying that. You should do it because you're interested in your team. But I thought it was a waste of time when I'm so busy, but it is a really valuable time. It's important to have that relationship, and the kindness and grace and on general interest and quality time that you spend with your team will translate to them doing the same for your patients. And
I found that to be absolutely true. And one thing I teach my clients to do now is to, again, intentionally have periodic check-in meetings with individual team members, one-on-one.
Yeah.
And it could be literally, a 15-minute, check-in meeting at Starbucks next door, where we just sit down with them and check in. Hey, how are things going and we start out with home. How are things at home? And, as we know about our team members, we can, check in on very specific details. Maybe we know that, one of the team members is struggling with an errant teen, and we can talk about how things are going. What resources do you need? How can we help? And then, making it intentional around that with the idea of, it's genuine. We're genuinely interested in our team members. It's not just a tactic, but we're genuinely interested in them. And I find that we all know that our most precious commodity is our time. We all know that. And when you intentionally spend time with team members, you're showing them perhaps, the ultimate appreciation by agreeing to spend time with them. You're spending one-on-one time with your team member. And I know it's not easy to do with a large practice, but it absolutely can be done. It becomes harder as your practice gets larger. But it can be done. And I think it's something that needs to be done, and we need to be intentional about it. And if we're not doing that, then I'm afraid the workplace becomes a ho-hum kind of experience for our team members, where they're not sure if they're loved, they're not sure if they're cared about, and in turn kind of show that those same kind of sentiments to our patients. But we have to let our patients know that we care deeply about them, that we and we show that not through our words, but through our action. And, that might be a takeaway for any of our listeners to really think about, and think about that's something they can apply in their practice. So, Paul, I've got a question for you. There are some of our listeners, because you've talked about, spending time in training and spending time, intentionally working out every aspect of the new patient experience. There'll be some of our listeners that are thinking, our practice is so big, we're so busy peddling, that we don't have time to do that. How would you respond to that? Because I know there's some that are thinking.
I'm going to take the Gary Takis quote and say, to go fast, you got to learn how to go slow. Is that what you always say? Something like that. That's what I'm thinking of.
That comes from my driving instructor. Some of you will know that I do enjoy high performance driving, and I have a private driving instructor, and he says, Gary, sometimes to go fast, you've got to slow down.
That's what it is.
And I got to tell you, probably the first 2 years he said that, I didn't understand one thing he was saying. I did not understand. So no, you don't get it. I want to go fast.
Yeah.
And sometimes to go fast, you have to slow down. And
That's true.
It's a high performance driving axiom, and it is absolutely true.
Yeah, so true. And I was going to say that, like, what we do is, I tell clients all the time, my coaching clients, and it's the same thing with cutting your clinical days, is we don't realize how much inefficiency is in our schedules. And when you shut down your practice, like, for instance, we'll do it 3 times a year. We call it a quarterly meeting. I guess it would really be a triannual meeting, but we'll shut down the practice for a whole Friday. And that could be a $15,000, $20,000 day for an opportunity cost. But I assure you, our month's revenue and the months we do it is no different than the months that we don't do it. It just, everything shifts into another spot. And I can tell you, I don't look at the opportunity cost, because it's so worth it to the team to band together, to work together, and to discuss issues. I mean, if we look at failed marriages, what is the issue? Well, I mean, we always say it's like family, money, but it really just boils down to communication. And we have the same issues with our team. You mentioned doing one-on-ones with your team. I think it's very rare to have somebody leave your practice because of the way you're running things if you're doing one-on-ones, because they will feel heard, that you're listening to them. You're asking them how things are going. But 2, you'll hear about everything that's going on so you can address it. Or if it's an issue you can't address, you can look at that team member and say, hey, what do you think I should do? And if they give you an answer, say, well, let's hammer this out. Let's figure out something. Let's collaborate. Yeah. And that's what I've done my entire career. But the training stuff, I just don't see how you can't afford not to do it. And I get the feeling, because we're busy and we're looking at production lost. In the same reason that when a solo doctor is the only doctor at the practice, they don't want to take a vacation, because they're not only are they looking at, this was a $5,000 to $10,000 vacation, they're looking at that this was like a $30,000 to $40,000 lost production that we had. And my experience has been, it's always been worth it. And even if you forgot about the financials of it, just for a pure life satisfaction and just being happy at work, it's worth it for that. And if that costs money, that's money I'm happily paying.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Paul. I think one of the issues that maybe is true for many of our listeners is the whole issue of being a PPO provider. They feel like they have to pedal like the proverbial hamster on the wheel because of the amount of money they're handing to the fat cats at the insurance company. And I get it, been there, done that, in the practice. And, when you're giving away 45% of your fee, to the fat cats at the insurance company, you become the proverbial hamster on the wheel, and it takes you away from everything about being a PPO practice, takes you away from developing your practice optimally. Now, at the top of this interview, you talked about successfully resigning from Delta. I'd like to come back to that now. Would you share your thoughts on that and your experience on that? I know there's a lot of listeners thinking, Gary, Delta is such a 5,000 pound gorilla. It represents such a big part of my practice. I could probably never drop Delta, but there you are.
We done that. We did it. And it was a big part of our practice. Yeah. I mean, we're talking 33% of our practice, 33% of our patients are Delta patients. And we've reached a level where, in my situation might be a little special. And this, I am going to put the little clause in here that I have a little safety net, is that we have reached capacity where we can't fit any more patients in our practice. So we're not going to expand any capacity. Our only thing we can do to control capacity is to raise our fees. And we can't do that when we're a network provider. So we decided to drop Delta first. That was the first one. And then we did like some little ones here and there over our practice course of just growing like here and there. But this was the first big one. And the reason we did that one first is because I figured that one's going to be the hardest one to keep. And and it was a nice, just big chunk where I said, you know what, if we lose all 33%, we'll get through it. I don't want to lose 33% of them,
Right.
but and I think when through the process, we talking with patients about it, we're letting them know what happens, that it's coming up. And I would say maybe 10% of those had a problem with it, setting up their next appointment. Now that we've dropped Delta, we're 3 months into it. I would say more people now that we're calling them and say, hey, you got to pay this out of pocket. You got to pay it to us and they're going to reimburse you. More people have an issue with it. So I think I have no stats to back this up. It's all anecdotal, but I think we're probably keeping roughly about 50% of our practice. I think some people are going to go somewhere else and they're going to come back. Right. But we're really trying to get people off of Delta and get them onto our membership plan. And we're kind of explaining that. We're showing them that, you know, if you get it for free as a benefit from work, that's one thing. But if you're paying out of pocket from your check, let me show you something that's a little different, that makes a little bit more sense, and you can come see us.
Yeah, but your membership plan is so much better than than paying for a Delta plan. And you're right.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of, we assume that everybody that has, say, Delta is provided to them as an employee benefit. And that's true with many Delta plans. But what is also very true is that many times the employer will provide it in the form of a payroll deduction. So the patient's actually paying for it themselves. And if you can have a candid conversation with that patient and say, you know, you'd be much better off with our in-office membership plan. Let me show you that. That's a little nuance that a lot of offices don't realize. They just automatically assume that everybody that has, say, Delta, you know, has it as an employee benefit. Well, many do, but there are many also that choose to pay for it. And then we can show them our membership plan and show them it's a much better deal.
But I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be hard to continue to provide the level of care we're doing. And we've always done it. I think we've always had like fee for service, like mentality and service to our patients. But this labor market this past year and a half with wages, the way they've went, I eventually hit a spot where I said, I can't afford to lose any of these people. They're so great. And I can't afford to pay them what everyone else is paying. Yeah. And I need to, because I don't want to lose them. And the only other knob I can turn is I got to raise my fees. And I can't do that as an in-network provider. So like, it was this perfect storm for us. It was the right time in our practice life. And scary, but not at all. Scary thinking about, but not at all going through it.
Well, I'm going to help our listeners feel better for just a minute. This happened relatively recently, within the last month or so. But a doctor reached out to me from Southern California, from Orange County. Big, strong practice. And he said, Gary, I need your help. He said, you know, I never really knew what I was writing off, but since I've been listening to your podcast, I've been trying to figure it out. And I now have a better handle of what I'm writing off in the form of my insurance adjustments. And he said, I've just discovered that with certain of our Delta plans, I'm getting reimbursed $57. These are the low level Delta plans. These are horrible plans. Yeah. He's getting $57 for a hygiene appointment, and that's cleaning, exam, and x-rays. And he said, Gary, and this is where I'm going to help our listeners feel better right now. He said, and I'm paying my hygienist $80 an hour. He's getting $57
math
for the appointment. And he said, you know, in the past, Gary, I was trying to break even by at least paying their hourly rate. And I know that wasn't really breaking even because I still had the equipment and the room and the supplies and the, infection control. And I had to pay the admin to support, get a butt in the seat and hygiene. But now I'm paying $80 an hour and I'm getting 57. And he said, that is simply untenable. I need your help. He's now a client, and we're moving down the path to successfully resign from PPO plans.
That's great.
So, you know, it can be done, but that model is untenable. I mean, unless you're, in dentistry, unless you'd like to pay out of your pocket to provide care to patients, which I don't think applies to many of our listeners.
No. And what's interesting with you, Gary, is that I don't know if I asked you this on a podcast or an interview, or if we were just talking between podcasts, but I remember asking you how many of your coaching clients it didn't work for over your career of consulting. And I think you said just one. There was one that just couldn't do it. It wasn't because of the logistics. It was because of the doctor, I think, if I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One. Now there have been, and to complete the whole equation, there have been 5 doctors that I have said, don't do this in your practice, because you're not in a position to be able to do this successfully. You don't have enough demand. It's not really relationship driven. You're not giving people reasons to come to your practice. You've got no discernible reason why a patient should come to your practice, then go to the clinic next door. And I'm using clinic in the pejorative term. You're not giving them any reasons. And every time, those 5 cases, the doctor has had a very sad expression on their face, but they've said, Gary, you're telling me something that I believe I already knew. And it wasn't that they couldn't ever do it, but they just weren't in a position to do it now. They weren't in a position to do it now. But I've successfully helped over 400 practices successfully resign from PPO plans. So you can do the math there and think about where you might fall in there. And it's probably the most important strategic decision you'll ever make. And the benefits are manifest. So many.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, when we have the Delta patients come in out of network, it's fantastic. Like it is just like, because if you look at like PPO write-offs, you might have a 30% on average of your total fees, but those hygiene codes are 55% sometimes. I mean, that's where they really ding you.
When that patient continues to come to you, they're providing you the ultimate compliment. They're saying, Dr. Etchison, I want to keep coming here because I appreciate the way you take care of me. I appreciate the way you and your team member take care of me. And one thing, and I would politely suggest that, why have you been able to do this successfully? Certainly the demand issue helps.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It does.
But I would go much further than that. I would say, Paul, the reason you were successful doing that, it's because of the attention that you and your team members have put on the patient experience. There's no stone unturned in your practice on the patient experience.
Right.
And as a result, patients, they want to go to a practice. They intentionally choose to go to a practice that takes care of them that way, even though it costs them more. They choose to do that because it matches their value system. And I'm going to say that I don't want to say anybody can do it, but it can be done if you put the right pieces in place. It can absolutely be done.
One thing we've noticed that was kind of interesting that I didn't think was going to happen. I guess I wasn't even thinking about this, but we're realizing that the patients that are staying with us out of network Delta, we like these people a lot.
Well, and they like you. It's mutual. It's mutual.
And all of the patients that were kind of like the ones that we go on the schedule and we go, oh gosh, they're always up there complaining. They're complaining, saying we told them something different. It's always another thing. They're not going to see you out of network. And we are so, we're so sad that they're leaving. It's like, we're so glad that they're gone.
Yeah. I recently did a debrief with one of my clients after we have successfully resigned from all plans, including Delta. And we are now more than 6 months through the next recall cycle, so we could really see what's happening, in terms of what's happening with hygiene. She lost a big, strong practice. She lost 12% of her in-network Delta patients. 12%.
That's unbelievable.
How do you like those odds? Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we're going through the list, she's pointing to these names. And we're going through it together on a Zoom meeting. And she said, and this patient, she said, this is one that 3 times in the last year, Gary, I have seen him after hours on emergency basis. He has a mouthful of old amalgam fillings, and I keep recommending to replace them because they're all breaking down. He never does it, but I come in after hours to take care of him. I've done this 3 times in the last year. I make the announcement that we're no longer going to be contrary with Delta, and he does a burnout out of the parking lot. And she said, you know what, Gary, if you would have told me that, resigning from Delta, that I would lose these patients, she said, I would have done it just for that.
Just for the one guy.
Just for the one guy,
for him.
just to give me better, peace of mind and better sanity around it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it. It wasn't our intentions at all. We weren't trying to get rid of bad patients, but it was a strategic decision. And we weren't on a lot of plans. We were in Zealous, which is an umbrella, and we were in Delta. Right. That's all we're in. So over the course, we have dropped certain plans, and they were never a big chunk, but we've tried to reduce our write-off as we grew. But my always intentionality was I wanted to grow the practice to maximum capacity before dropping. But we're at a kind of a crossroad right now that's kind of interesting because I'm losing an associate. I'll say it's me, and I have 3 GPs and 3 specialists, and we're losing an associate, and we're looking at our delta drop, and our new patients have gone down roughly maybe 20-25% since we've dropped delta. And we're looking at this saying, do we want to go down to instead of a 3.5 doctor practice, a 2.5 doctor practice? And if we're going to do that, we've got to drop for the rest of the stuff, and we've got to probably lay off some people. And it's just not in my heart. I don't think it's where we're going. I think we're at a crossroads where we're just having to decide really soon in the next 2 weeks or so, which way we're going to go long term. So
I need more information, of course, but I actually think you can do this in such a way that you won't lose any team members. In other words, we can keep enough of those in your practice to where you're not going to lose good team members. In fact, you're going to be able to, provide them with a much more pleasant work environment, because it's not just the doctors that get affected by those PPO plans, it's our patients as well. When Delta doesn't pay a claim because the patient made the mistake of coming in 5 months and 29 days after their last hygiene appointment, who is the patient mad at? Are they mad at Delta, or are they mad at you?
Nope, they're mad at us.
And they're mad at your hygiene scheduling coordinator for not catching.
And we usually accept the responsibility too.
Yeah.
We do.
As would be the right thing. But quality of life for your team members go up dramatically. Paul,
I'll add one thing. I'm sorry. I just want to add one thing to that, Gary.
Please.
Is that we have a lot of our days, we have 7 hygienists running for 1 or 2 doctors to check. And I know the listeners saying, how does one doctor check 7 tiers of hygiene? And all of our doctors will check 3 chairs of hygiene, but we have a lot of no exam hygiene chairs. And that's what's really helped us have such a large patient base, and what has really helped us get the capacity and have every hour of the day, there's a butt in the seat in every seat. And, but that's the issue we're running to now, is that who's going to check all this hygiene?
Right.
And doctor, I am going to do it, but I don't want to do it. Yeah. I'm going to do it as a transition period, but I told everybody this is not my long-term plan. I'm not coming back to 4 days a week. Yeah.
It's why many dental practices reach maturity in their hygiene schedule and then plateau. Yeah. And I'm a big advocate of a hygiene-driven practice, but I'm also very empathetic. And I'm, three checks an hour are hard. That's hard. 2, it's still difficult, but can be done. At 3, we're starting to get to the wheels falling off. More than that, the wheels are falling off. And maybe that we got to have you back and talk about a number of different details about growth and the challenges that they present.
I got a lot to share.
Would you be?
I got a lot of lessons to share. Yeah.
Can I bring you back?
Oh, absolutely.
I'll put you on the spot since it's being recorded and everything. If you say no, we'll edit it out. But
of course I'll come back.
I'd love to have you back. Paul, I know in the meantime, I know a lot of our listeners would like to get in touch with you, and I want to brag on your podcast. Dental Practice Heroes is the name of the podcast. You've got 2 great books that belong on every dentist library. How's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you? If they want to reach out.
I would just say, Facebook Messenger is fine. I'm on Facebook, or go to my website, dentalpracticeheroes.com. Perfect. And there's a contact form. You can even, set up a call with me if you like. Scheduling thing is right there. So
it's dentalpracticeheroes.com.
Yep.
We'll put that in the show notes. So if you go to Thriving Dentist Show and just find this episode, scroll down, you'll see a link and just click it and you'll be right there. In the meantime, Paul, I want to say thank you. First of all, thanks for your friendship. It's been a blessing for many, many years for me. And thanks so much for your friendship. Thanks for producing an amazing podcast. If you like Thriving Dentist Show, you're going to love Dental Practice Heroes. And thanks for the inspiration that you provide our listeners. You've done it. You've been there. You've done it. I heard you say that you stubbed your toe along the way a number of different times. And I love your transparency and your honesty around that. But man, thanks for being you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I'm always excited for this opportunity, and like I said, you're a mentor of mine, and it's so cool for me to be interviewed by you. And thank you for all you do in the industry, and thank you for all you've provided me. I think you don't even know it, but I mean, you were my gym buddy for a really long time. Every time I was working out, I was listening to Gary. So
thank you.
So happy to be on, and thanks.
Well, as we wrap up today, I also want to say thanks to our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. I do have a favor to ask, and that is that if you haven't done it already, hit subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, whatever your podcast directory is. Hit subscribe. It's free. That just means for us, every Wednesday when we upload a new podcast, it'll be automatically uploaded for your listening convenience. On that note, thank you for the privilege of your time. Look forward to connecting with you on the next Thriving Dentist Show.